It could be a game changer. Chinese President Xi Jinping inaugurates a massive new port in Peru. What impact will it have on Latin America and beyond? Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. While in Peru for a state visit and the APEC leaders meeting, Chinese President Xi Jinping and his Peruvian counterpart, Dina Boluarte, inaugurated South America's largest and most modern port. Built by the Chinese state-owned company Cosco Shipping, Chancay Port will boost trade by cutting shipping time between Peru and Asia. The new megaport makes Peru the main South American hub for China's Belt and Road Initiative. My colleague Mike Walter spoke with Peru's Vice Minister of Trade, Teresa Mera.
Teresa, thanks so much for visiting with us. I know it's a busy time for you. The agenda is described as empower, include, grow. Just talking to you before we rolled, the inclusion and the growing is already taking place. You have some agreements that you've been able to reach. Can you describe what's happened?
Yes, for us, for Peru, APEC is a very relevant platform to expand our free trade agreements. In fact, at this stage, we have agreements with 14 economies from APEC, and now yesterday we signed an optimization of our free trade agreement with China after 14 years that become into force. We found some spaces in the last meeting, APEC meeting here in Peru in 2016. Both presidents talk about the possibility to analyze new opportunities to strengthen our trade. Then we found that space, and yesterday we signed additional chapters and additional optimization of some of the current chapters in the agreement. Today also we are going to sign our free trade agreement with Hong Kong, and we are in a very quick process of negotiation with Indonesia.
So, you know, there's so much talk about this week, the megaport, the inauguration. Clearly, that's going to open up new avenues for trade. How do you envision that moving forward? How does Chancay change the equation?
That's going to represent a big change, not only for us as Peru, because I think that this is our opportunity to become a hub for the region, a logistic hub for the region, but also for our neighbors. So in our particular case, in the case of Peru, we have big expectations on that. We are working very hard on to take all the infrastructure aspects to take more advantage of this port. It's an open platform for going much faster to China. You know, we are a country which imports fresh products, so time, it's very important for us. We are going to have like between 10 and 12 days shorter in the time to go to China, and then to China to the other country, like economies or countries around Asia.
And speed is a need, but also that the speed also cuts down on costs too, and actually it's much, you know, when you think about it, you know, obviously if you've got blueberries, you've got to get them there quickly, but the speed also reduces the costs and really is a plus in that regard as well.
Indeed, that's also one of the elements that we consider in that, because we are in the possibility to be more competitive for the international markets.
Obviously, trade, you're thinking about that today, working out agreements, but it's also a vision towards what the future looks like. What does this do for Peru's economy, maybe in the next 5 years, do you think, having the port there?
In Peru, we have a plan for which defines our profile as a exporter country. In that sense, now in this moment, we are a main exporter of minerals and also agricultural products, most of them in raw. But we are working very hard to go a step further, to industrialize our production and to change our supply to the world. Also for agricultural products, maybe to process them We are doing that with some Andean grains and also with cacao, chocolates. We are moving to chocolates from cocoa beans to chocolates, and we are working very hard, in particular with small enterprises around the whole country.
What has APEC meant for the Global South in terms of inclusion, would you say, and sustainable development?
For us, that was a relevant window also to learn and to take the experiences that other countries in Asia already developed. That means taking into account previous experiences in how to do things in less time with less errors, less mistakes. So that was a relevant space for exchanging information, for cooperation, collaboration in the field of best practices in different chains of production, also regarding connectivity, telecommunications. How can we do things better to involve our main producers? I mean, main in amount, but there are most small producers to get stuck to that international chains of trade.
The Belt and Road Initiative obviously has been quite important in Latin America and Caribbean nations. 22 of them have signed on. Chancay, of course, a prime example of how it's working. How would you describe the Belt and Road Initiative and kind of the influence it's had on Latin America?
We've been working on that. We've been participating in that plan or in that project in China. I think that is very important because that's also give us the opportunity to talk with the other countries with that participating in this plan to work together and to exchange not only plans, not only experiences, but also to find opportunities to work together in how to provide to the world, to China and to other places.
As you meet here, APEC obviously looking for opportunities for trade engagement, but you also have to be looking at the headwinds. There's still global conflicts, there's still efforts at protectionism. What do you see when you look at the landscape? Where are the opportunities, where are the challenges for APEC?
I think that global issues in certain manner affect the decisions that we have to take in the forum, knowing the context by itself, but maybe in particular in the time to get to a consensus. But finally, we are getting that goal. We are getting that goal. I have to say that during our presidency this year, in May, we got 3 declarations after some years. In one case, 2, and the other ones 3 years that they were not a joint declaration by consensus in the groups. I'm talking about the consensus on tourism, the declaration on tourism, also on trade, and the joint declaration on trade and women. So there were 3 declarations in 1 month, but also in the case of agriculture and also small and medium enterprises, we also got declarations. Finally, we had the ability and also the possibility to get to a consensus to establish what are going to be the further movements among the APEC area. That conflicts, that disturbances on the international markets are taken into account, but precisely to identify how are we going to face these situations, because anyway, they exist. Most of them are not in the middle of the fora, but they exist and affect the market. And we identify some actions on how to collaborate together to face this situation.
Climate change obviously is out there and a pressing issue. What are the discussions surrounding climate change, and also digital economy seems to be the buzzword we hear a lot these days as well. Can you talk about both of those?
Digital economy is a key issue, not only in the margins of the APEC meetings, but also around the world. I think that at this stage is out of discussion of the relevance of the digital economy in our countries. Being aware of that, during this year, we present 3 weeks, 3 digital weeks, where there were spaces for discuss different concerns about digitalization and digital economy. Let's talk about, we already talked about artificial intelligence, among others. Also, how can we do to make these benefits of the digital economy goes to small places, to the further places around our economies. I think that was very important. We count with the participation of the academia and experts from that particular sectors.
In climate change?
Well, that's a big concern for all of us. I think that all our economies are facing determined situations regarding this. Last year we had very difficult moments because during 1 year we faced two phenomena that affect even some of our crops. But anyway, in that sense, we talk about this very seriously in how to find the spaces to develop internal policies to try to mitigate these issues.
President Xi Jinping had a letter to the Peruvian people, which was published in the newspaper, showing deep affection and kind of illustrating the relationship between these two countries and how it dates back many, many years. Can you talk to us about that relationship, how it's kind of grown over the years, because you've been part of this, you've watched it grow, and where does it go from here?
Well, that's, I think that the free trade agreement we signed 14 years ago, that was a departing element for our relationship. Our trade increased in a very relevant manner, and then with time we saw that our supply and imports and exports are changing, are moving. Sometimes we hear that you are not taking advantage of that agreement, you are just receiving what China sent to your country, but it's not necessarily that way, because we identify also opportunities for our producers, like buying goods for capital goods for the enterprises, and also that's our main trade partner for now. After instead, I have to say that in this moment, minerals is still leading our basket, but our agricultural products are increasing, and they are going to increase more, because this week is going to be signed some additional sanitary protocols to increase these exports of agricultural products. And also with Chancay, there is an opportunity for the establishment of enterprises to produce technological products, which is one of our main interests too, as part of this project that I already mentioned, to change our supply to the world. I think that we have to be very, very fast and very dynamic to adapt our internal offer to our production for international markets. China is an opportunity. It's helping us to get this goal. In addition to trade, they also are part of we receive relevant investment from them. They are one of our main investors. Maybe not yet the first one, but they are investing a lot here in the country.
It's an important relationship, no doubt about it. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
As we have been reporting all week, leaders from the 21 member economies are in Peru for the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum. That group accounts for over 60% of the world's GDP, nearly half of world trade, and around 40% of the global population. Ahead of the leaders' meeting, some 1,200 private sector CEOs and officials held a summit. On the agenda, bilateral trade and development. CGTN's Jim Spellman has more in this report.
Leaders from the worlds of business and politics have converged on Lima, Peru for the APEC CEO Summit. Fernando Zavala is the CEO Summit chairman.
We will have business talking about energy transition, climate change, and also talking about technology. And the idea is to have academics, politics, and businessmen talking together and trying to make some agreement that what can we do together to grow more in the world economy.
The APEC economies account for about 60% of global GDP, so there are plenty of opportunities for investment represented here. Peru's President Dina Boluarte delivered the opening keynote address with a message that Peru is open for business.
Peru opens its doors and welcomes capital and investment funds from around the world, offering foreign investors legal and economic stability and clear rules of the game that guarantee sustainable growth. We are promoting private investment by unlocking crucial projects that will mark a turning point in our economy.
Panel discussions, including one moderated by CGTN's Tian Wei, are addressing the challenges and opportunities presented by changing business landscapes and emerging technologies like AI.
What we're hearing from companies is the fact that with all of the changes happening around, it is an opportunity today to think about how they can even reinvent their business and do things differently. So nobody wants to let go of this opportunity, even if it is challenging. Good things will happen after that.
Beyond the speeches and roundtables, the CEO Summit is an opportunity for business and political leaders to spend unscripted time together and create relationships they can build on in the coming months and years. Jim Spellman, CGTN, Lima, Peru.
Although economic and geopolitical factors are slowing down growth in the APEC region, trade has shown signs of recovery. That's according to a new report from the APEC Secretariat and APEC Policy Support Unit led by Carlos Kuriyama. He sat down with Mike Walter in Lima.
Carlos, first of all, thank you for visiting with us. I know that you compiled a report for the leaders, which you were kind enough to share with journalists this week. And it seemed to me that the outlook looked pretty positive. I mean, 3.5% growth among APEC members. Kind of give us a sense, if you could, dig into the numbers, kind of give us a sense of where we're at.
Thanks for having me, Mike. So, yeah, this year growth in the Asia-Pacific region is going to be around 3.5%. So it's a good growth rate. And why is this? It's because inflation has gone down. So because of that, also, there has been a recovery of private consumption. And so this has helped growth. But I think we also need to be vigilant because there are some headwinds that could affect growth in the near term. For example, the increase of protectionism, some uncertainties on supply chains, and also geopolitical tensions. Those things also affect the economy.
It was interesting. I went back and watched the interview you did with Ana Naidu a year ago in San Francisco, and at that time, kind of coming out of the pandemic, other issues dealing with at that time. But it seems like also one of the other things, and maybe we can get a little bit more into the headwinds in a second or two, but it seems though trade among APEC members also at a good pace.
Exactly. So we are expecting trade volume to grow by 3.4% this year. And for next year, if we don't have any negative shocks, it will be around 4.4%. And I think this is also related to the fact that the economy is more stable. The inflation is under control. So this is not just recovery of a private consumption, but also interest rates are starting to go down. So that means that there are better conditions for trade finance as well. So all of this is helping trade, definitely.
Talk to us about the agenda this week. And when you enter into a week like this, you bring all the members together. There's a lot of dialogue. There's hopes that at the end of the week, you can arrive at some conclusions. Where are you as the events are unfolding, and what's it like when you finally reach the finish line?
Well, I think APEC is a good opportunity for dialogue, to build trust, and to try to find consensus on topics of common interest. And I think the agenda has been very rich. We've been talking issues about trade, but we have been talking issues about sustainability, inclusiveness, among others. For example, in terms of inclusiveness, we are talking about some guidelines to try to increase the participation in the formal economy. So to make the transition from the informal to the formal economy. Also, in terms of sustainability, we are talking about how we can promote certain sources of sustainable energy sectors, right? So how can we improve the production of, for example, low carbon technologies, among other things.
You wrote an article, you actually co-wrote an article back in August, and in it you say trade in APEC expanded in the first quarter compared to the same period in 2023, which we kind of went over, buoyed by global demand. However, increasing trade restriction and other trade remedies reflect growing geoeconomic fractures affecting APEC members. So can you expand on that? What are the main concerns as you look forward to like 2025?
Well, something that we have to stay vigilant is about the rise of protectionism. So we have seen, for example, an increase in the use of non-tariff measures, like, for example, export licenses, quotas, restrictions in general, and that affect many things. For example, that could affect production costs. And at the end, if production cost is higher, what's going to happen with the consumer prices? It also will go up. So I think we have to stay very, very vigilant.
One of the things that came up during your briefing with reporters is the trade tensions between the United States and China. And you pointed out, even though there's all this negative reporting, that it's still robust, this relationship between the United States and China. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's very robust. For example, in 2022, despite this political rhetoric that we could hear in media, the economic reality was completely different, to the point that the trade flows between the US and China reached a historic high. And it's one of the most important trade flows, bilateral trade flows, all over the world. And I think these trade relations are going to remain strong. So China and the US depend one another. There have been a lot of companies from China investing in the US, and also companies from the US investing in China for so many years. So I think it's impossible to change the dynamics in a very short time span. So I think both economies complement each other, and working together, I mean, they could really benefit.
You mentioned protectionism as one of the headwinds that you have to deal with, but there are some headwinds you really can't do anything about, which I thought was interesting. You talked about aging. We've got aging populations, and that's a concern. Supply chains also seem to be an area of concern. Can you talk a little bit more about the headwinds that you see out there on the horizon?
Well, in terms of the headwinds, for example, in terms of aging population, the proportion of elderly vis-a-vis the working age population is much higher nowadays. And so this is going to have serious implications on, for example, the fiscal position of economies, right? The tax income is going to be much lower. Also, the labor force is going to shrink, and this could affect economic prospects. And also, governments are going to spend more on health and pension costs, right? So those are some of the things that we are worried about, and I think it's important to implement certain structural reforms. And we have seen some economies in the world that are starting to do so. For example, the population are living longer, and so they are raising the retirement age. That has been the case of China, for example.
Let me ask you about economic cooperation and opportunity. When we look at the landscape out there, where do you see some avenues where there's some low-hanging fruit, so to speak?
Yeah, I think it's very important to talk issues about sustainability, issues about inclusiveness, things about trade facilitation, for example. We have some concerns about trade, and we need to implement measures to make trade flows more smooth. For example, right now we have a big problem in a way that for vessels to go from Asia to Europe, it's taking 1 to 2 weeks longer because many vessels are not using the Suez Canal because of some security concerns. That's increasing costs, that's increasing time. But I think we could, facilitate a bit the things, but also having more expedite customs procedures, for example, in ports. So those things are being discussed in APEC.
You talked about port, the Suez Canal. Everyone's talking about the megaport, Chancay. How does that change the dynamic in terms of the flowing of trade?
I think this is going to help a lot the Peruvian economy, and we will see some interesting movements here in the region. Probably some goods from other Latin American countries will come first to Peru and then ship to Asia. So the time for a good from Peru to reach Asia is going to be reduced probably by a week. So right now, most of the products from Peru go to ports in North America, in, for example, Long Beach in California, or some Mexican ports on the Pacific, and then they go to Asia. So by having a straight route, it's going to simplify things. It's going to be cheaper, faster, and products are going to be more competitive, Peruvian products. So this is creating very interesting dynamics also in the Peruvian economy, because some regions in the north, they are going to benefit from this port. And let me give you an example how important this is. When Peru became a member in APEC in 1998, right? From that time to now, Peruvian trade with APEC members, with Asia Pacific, multiplied 9 times.
Wow.
But the question is, has the port capacity in Peru increased by 9 times during all this time? The answer is no. So we have an infrastructure deficit, and the Chancay Port is going to help us on that, to reduce these bottlenecks.
I was looking at one measurement, I have it written down here. Since becoming a member of APEC in 1998, around 6 million Peruvians escaped extreme poverty, and about 3.4 million moved above the poverty line. This kind of illustrates why these kind of cooperative agreements are so important. Can you talk about that?
That's correct, Mike. I think all of this is important, but also I think it's because Peru has been following basically a policy based on economic openness. So in that way, Peru has liberalized unilaterally, also in a negotiated manner, through trade agreements with the US, European Union, China, Japan, Korea, Australia. Peru is part of CPTPP, for example, that gathers 11 APEC members. So most of trade in Peru is covered by these trade agreements, and it's thanks to the membership in APEC that Peru was able to strengthen these relations with other governments and then start negotiations for all these trade deals. So it's been quite positive. Without that, it would have been much harder. For example, there are some countries in the region, like Colombia, that has been trying to seek trade agreements with many Asian countries, but it has been much harder for them. And part of it, I think, is because they are not part of APEC, as opposed to Peru.
Mm-hmm. I wrote this down because you mentioned this during the news conference. Global problems, global solutions. It seems pretty plain and simple, and yet multilateralism, protectionism. It's a fight that's been going on for some time. What would your persuasive argument be to people who just want to be entrenched and not be open to multilateralism?
At the end of the day, those who are going to pay the price are the consumers. That's going to increase prices. Things are going to be more expensive. But if we source from the most efficient sources, I mean, prices could go down. If we have more variety of products to choose from, also that improves quality, I think. So I think it's important to be open, and the numbers in Peru show how Peru has been able to reduce poverty and to improve living standards. Of course, there's still a lot of work to do, but things have improved if we compare the situation 20, 25 years ago.
Carlos Kuriyama, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Mike. Thank you so much.
And that's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C.